June 1826 when work finally began on the longed-for Liverpool and Manchester Railway. 4 years had passed since the first survey, and now George Stephenson was back in favour. He had accepted the post of principal engineer, taking upon himself the job of designing not merely the bridges and earthworks involved, but also all the new tools and equipment needed. He sent to Newcastle for a young draftsman, Thomas Gooch, who lodged with George and his wife in 31 Upper Parliament Street. And together they worked on George's ideas, poring over his clumsy, rough sketches until sense and scale could be made of them.
The Railway Committee had reservations about George's decision to begin the building of the railway at Chatmoss, an immense black spongy bogland at the eastern end of the line. But George was determined.
My performance before the Commons Committee on the bill in 1825 makes it imperative that I do an outstanding job in constructing the line I could not then persuade Parliament to accept.
So determined was he to make his critics eat their words that when choosing his assistant engineers, George Stephenson ignored all the established professionals and instead appointed 3 former apprentices of his own. In this way, he kept control of the whole construction. This first ever intercity line was to be built by George Stephenson and no one else.
Not that there was much glory around in those early weeks spent cutting drains on either side of the line of way. The sides of the ditches caved in as fast as they could be dug. Nor were they the only thing to disappear into the ooze. John Dixon, fresh from Darlington, was never to forget his first sight of the enormous marsh.
Help! Help!
Keep still, Dixon. Don't fight it, man. That's it. Stand.
Stand! Don't move the feet. Here, I'll catch hold of this rope. Come on. Come on!
That's it. That's all right, John.
Yes, Mr. Stephenson. Though, I fear I've lost a shoe.
That's lucky, man. Creatures have drowned in you. There's 40 foot deep in places. Well, now there's been baptised. Does there know I'm making her responsible for the line of way hereabouts?
Oh, but Mr. Stephenson, when I can't even set foot on the marsh, how may I supervise its crossing?
By observing the men, laddie. The men and myself. Now, we strap boards to our feet before ever we step out onto the moss. It spreads the load, see? Just as I plan to do with my railway line. I mean to float my track across on a continuous raft of brushwood and heather. Our problem is these ditches. They keep all the time filling in with water. If they could only be made to carry it away. Has there any ideas?
I'm afraid not, sir.
I was thinking of giving that a worse bit of line, eh? Don't worry, man. We'll no let Chatmoss best us. We'll solve this drainage problem. Barrels.
Barrels? Empty barrels?
Well, I'm no wasting full ones. Aye, barrels, Dixon. We'll knock the ends out and then lay 'em into end. Try it, eh? Come on.
Barrels? Barrels?
At the other end of the line, the Liverpool tunnel at Edge Hill remained in the charge of Charles Vignoles. This engineer had been appointed by the Railway Board while George was in disgrace, and the 2 men now found themselves in the unenviable position of being expected to work together.
By November 1826, George reported to we members of the board that the pilot boring in the vicinity of this original shaft of the Edge Hill Tunnel, begun in September, was 13 feet too far to the south of the true line, and that it therefore threatened the foundations of certain houses in Great George Square. He blamed Charles Vignoles for this error, and although matters were quickly put right, relations between the 2 engineers became so strained that Vignoles chose to offer us his resignation.
George Stephenson now put 21-year-old Joseph Locke in charge of the tunnel. Work here and at Chatmoss made slow progress. George's plan for bridging the marsh was to lay overlapping hurdles of heather and brushwood and cover them with earth, sand, gravel and cinders. Parts of the moss were now firm enough to support a temporary track for bringing in materials, men and equipment. But no impression was being made at the Manchester end, which called for a huge embankment. There, the moss had a seemingly insatiable appetite for the spoil being tipped into it. And now the Railway Board panicked and predicted ruin. Even George's strongest supporter, Henry Booth, was worried.
George, we are frankly disturbed by the position with regard to Chatmoss.
Oh, aye. There's galloping up vast amounts of tonnage. And I noticed that sent some chaps to spy out my progress.
It's the cost of the business, Stephenson. The enormous expense already incurred, and with no appreciable results as yet, the board feels, well, we're all of us gravely alarmed.
And we have reason to understand that the resident engineer there, John Dixon, he is uneasy?
Aye, Mr. Booth, sir. But then, between ourselves, young John has always been a bit of a doubting Thomas.
You must know the other directors are seriously alarmed, Stephenson. They speak of bridging the marshland as a hopeless task, impossible.
Oh.
As for the expense, well, I tell you frankly, we cannot sustain much more of it.
But with the outlay already made, there's surely no abandon my scheme. It would mean such a great loss, Mr. Cropper. They'll not be taking another route now.
That must depend on what you can offer us, George. What's your solution to the problem? In view of the board's anxiety, what will you do now?
Me? I shall go on tipping, Mr. Booth. I'm no in two minds about my success. I can do it.
George did go on tipping. He quite simply never thought of failure. He had said he would bridge the Moss at a cost of £40,000, and that is what he intended doing. He never lost heart, and very gradually, almost imperceptibly, a firm causeway began to stretch out into the marsh. By the autumn of 1827, it was obvious that George's plan was working. In the meantime, it was the tunnel under Liverpool running down to Wapping Dock which held the attention of the general public. Nothing like it had ever been attempted before. Here were 300 workmen in flickering candlelight using the simplest of tools to dig out a tunnel 22 feet wide by 16 feet high. It was to be 2,250 yards long, once all the individual sections were joined together. And a great deal of blasting took place, the loosened red and yellow sandstone being hoisted to the surface and used to build earthworks along the line. All in all, some 500,000 tons of rock would eventually be excavated.
Oh. I'm glad to see the back of that, though. It's the clearing up after the blasting I most ate. Let's have a rest for a few minutes, eh? God, I don't envy you, miners. The sooner we finish the tunnel and get out in the sun again, the happier Mike Devlin will be. Hey, Geordie?
It could be raining out there, Mum.
Raining, no rain. Let's out for some fresh air. Since we moved away from the shaft, it's hard breathing.
Once we join up the sections, it'll be fine. There'll be drafts of air then, and it can not be long now.
Aye. Well, the sooner the better for me. I'm fair sick of living like a mole. The only thing to be said for this rotten candlelight is that I can't probably see your ugly mug. But I can't see what I'm drinking either. I'm fair fed up with making Stevenson's bloody tunnel.
It's not just a tunnel. It's history we're making, man. Here we are piercing the bowels of the earth with a shovel and a pickaxe. I tell the folk will no believe it in time to come. Our grandchildren will be right proud of that.
You think we'll ever have enough money for a ticket, Geordie?
Aye. Mr. Stephenson says his trains will belong as much to us as to the quality. He says his trains will take us all to the sea.
The sea? The sea holds no excitement for me. I've lived by the docks too long.
That's to imagine these railroads set out all over the country, man. With the trains taking bairns what they never seen the sea. That's what Mr. Stephenson wants.
Geordie, did you hear it? Listen. Shh.
It's them, Mike. It's the other team, man.
It's another of your bloody miracles. Give me the pick. Come on, Geordie. Dig.
Other link-ups followed rapidly. George Stephenson was quite definite in his specifications as to bricks and pit props. There were to be no accidents as a result of using poor materials. Here was no unprincipled schemer at work, which was the view the educated London civil engineers still held of this self-taught colliery mechanic. Each day, gangs of navvies hacked and blasted their way through the great stone chasm of Olive Mount. Embankments rose higher, and more huge blocks of stone, some weighing as much as 2 tons, were fixed firmly into place as the Sankey Viaduct advanced arch by arch. And wherever a problem arose, there was George's big white-haired figure. He rode constantly back and forth over the 31 miles. Tired and plastered with mud, he would usually end the day with a call into the company office in Clayton Square, where there was always a great deal needing his attention.
George, may I introduce Mr. George Cunningham, a local businessman who desires to make your acquaintance? This is Mr. Stephenson, who is responsible for the line of way, sir.
I'll no shake hands, sir. I'm that clarted with muck. What is it I can do for that, Mr. Cunningham?
Mr. Stephenson, I am the owner of extensive nurseries at Broad Green. I have over the years built up a fine business, a flourishing business, as you might say.
Aye, I mind it well. That's the man who owns the flower gardens I'm thinking of. They were a canny sight this summer, sir, a canny sight.
Thank you.
I noted the daffodils in the springtime too. For Bobby, my horse and I, well, that is indeed our favourite bit of the line. Why, there's even weaned me to the carnation. A lady's flower, I've always thought it, but I tell that, Mr. Cunningham, the scent of that land has straightened my back for me on many a sour morning.
Well, I'm glad to hear it, Mr. Stephenson, but it is my fear that your railroad and my flowers are locked in deadly combat.
How's that, man?
Well,
Mr. Cunningham fears that the coming of the locomotive with its long black plumes of smoke, I am quoting you correctly, sir, will destroy his livelihood, George.
How's that, sir?
I have read of the locomotive engine, of how it vomits forth burning cinders and choking smoke, how the track itself vibrates with the weight and speed of the steam engines. Smoke and vibration, Mr. Stephenson, will drastically affect my living, breathing blossoms. Must life itself be forfeit to your infernal machines?
Mr. Cunningham, the locomotive engine
Is not necessarily the dragon you have pictured, sir. Indeed, it is not yet decided upon which parts of the line the locomotives shall be employed, if at all. Certain members of the railway board... Cropper, yes. Certain of us still favour the cable haulage method with stationary steam engines.
And that would not affect my nurseries at all.
Precisely. Not that I am in any position to promise there will be cable haulage along your part of the track, of course. Mr. Stephenson here is better placed to speak of that.
I have a bit to say on the subject. But while I mind it, Mr. Booth, Mr. Sanders would be very glad of the help. It looks like there's been some mistake in the money owing to Dixon's lads.
Figures are my peculiar passion, Mr. Cunningham. Do excuse me for a moment. Doubtless we shall both meet again.
Well, Mr. Stephenson, if it's true about cable haulage, I dare say
It's not true.
Not true. But first James Cropper, whom I know very well, and now Mr. Booth.
Just now I'm busy building the track. But when the time comes, I will fight for my locomotive engines.
I see.
There's no need to fear the lies about fire and smoke, man. It may be true in part of the colliery lines, but it'll no happen here in Lancashire. I shall solve the problem, Mr. Cunningham, make no mistake about that. Besides freight, I intend carrying passengers to Manchester. Does thou think I'd risk the lives of the ladies for mere profit?
I don't know, Stephenson. I don't know you.
I'm a plain-speaking fellow, an old engine man. I come of good pit stock. We know the earth, sir. I coax her into bloom myself. Oh, only with cabbages and cauliflowers, but they're the finest in Northumbria. And grown alongside the track, some of them. Because I wanted to see for myself if the smoke and we shake-up had any effect.
You say it did not.
I've shillings to prove it did not. My neighbours still buy my produce. Under this dirt, Mr. Cunningham, I boast a pair of green thumbs.
I do not deal in shillings, but in hundreds, nay, thousands of guineas.
I'll no damage the flowers. Indeed. Why should I? When we'll be wanting there to dress up the Duke's coach and some of the bridges along the line of way on the occasion of its opening.
The Duke? Which Duke would that be?
Our Prime Minister, sir, the Duke of Wellington. We hope he will agree to be the guest of honour at our opening ceremony.
I see. And when do you expect that to occur?
In 2 more years. If we harm that business, then by all means take us to the courts for compensation. But I think they'll be better advised to wait and decorate our opening day. The fee will be a generous one. I'm thinking of the publicity man.
Well, I must admit this puts a very different complexion on the matter. Of course, I should be delighted to honour the Duke and your railway too. I can see it now. Banks of red and pink, I think. Mr. Stephenson, I thank you. You have certainly lifted my spirits. How is it that we understand each other so well, sir?
We're both named George, and we're both businessmen.
Indeed. Indeed we are. Give me your hand. I'm not one to shrink from honest dirt when, as you say, we both make a living from land. Good luck with your railway, sir, and may you meet with no obstacle, fair sir, than George Cunningham.
So the railway advanced. A £10,000 loan was granted by the Exchequer to help finance costs, and Robert Stephenson returned from South America. His stay in Liverpool was necessarily brief, as he was badly needed back at the family's Newcastle factory. But George was delighted to see him again, and to demonstrate the progress being made with the railroad. Robert was the educated engineer his father could never hope to be, the one qualified man in the field towards whom George felt no bitterness. In time, their partnership was to benefit the whole world.
Chosen visitors, among them the editor of the Liverpool Mercury, were permitted to inspect the Edge Hill Tunnel excavations. The newspaper now gave George Stephenson its total support, saying he was indeed building the perfect railway, and speaking with some awe of the massive rails mounted on large blocks of stone. But not all the visitors to the tunnel were welcome or even expected.
Listen. Will you listen to that? There it is again.
I can no hear anything, mate.
Not hear it? That's singing, that is. Hymns or such like.
Well, stop in my head, man.
It's coming from underneath us. Coming out of the rock.
Coming out of a bottle.
No, Geordie. I did hear something. A voice. Get Mr. Stevenson. He's in the tunnel this morning, and he'll come for you.
Well, why me? The master will think I'm crazy, and it's likely he'll ship me back to Newcastle. Get him the sun, man.
But he'll come for you, Geordie. Listen.
Oh, my God. I'll get Mr. Stevenson.
Wait. I'm coming with you.
Here it is. It was just a bit here.
Aye. Hold the lantern steady, man.
It was a fearsome sound, sir. A voice in the very rock at our feet.
Hold my coat, Devlin. Keep the light steady. We'll take our picks to this and fathom this mystery of ours. There must be something going on to frighten a jarrow, lad. Right, Geordie? Come on now, we'll dig together.
Listen.
I'm feared we've pierced the bowels of the earth and wakened the devil.
Well, if we have, he sounds in a good enough mood.
It's coming through.
Oh, God. It's a head.
Oh, good morning, my friends. Your light is better than mine. My tunnel's rather dark, and much smaller, of course.
Who the hell's that?
My name is Joseph Williamson. But can you tell me, sir, am I near to Lime Street?
That's between Lime Street and Edge Hill, and what in God's name is that doing in my tunnel?
I am not in your tunnel, sir. I'm in my own tunnel. Might I point out that it was you who broke through my ceiling?
Geordie Devlin, make the hole bigger. I must see for myself how much this Berkey's undermined the section.
Yes, Mr. Stevenson.
Mr. Stevenson? Can I take it I have the honour of addressing Mr. George Stephenson?
Aye.
Oh, but I'm a great admirer of yours, sir. A very great admirer. Tunnels are indeed the glory of our society. Caves can be entertaining. Have you been to Rome, sir? No? Not seen the catacombs? Well, Derbyshire now. You'll have visited Derbyshire. Oh, there's natural beauty to be had in many places. But tunnels, as I'm sure you'll agree, man-made caverns, stolen from this planet we live on. Tunnels are indeed the jewels of the earth. Well, don't hesitate to drop in again any time, Mr. Stevenson.
Yon's a lunatic.
Aye. I'm blessed they're good hearing, Devlin. Or we might not have discovered Mr. Williamson for weeks.
I've heard of him. I thought the other lads were joking. Joseph Williamson, the mole of Liverpool. He's been building tunnels under his house and garden for years.
And he's finally found us.
This'll hold us up for weeks.
No, it won't. Nothing and nobody's an obstacle to the Iron Way.
George's prophecy was correct. The 9th of June, 1828, saw the Edge Hill Tunnel finished.
Shouldn't be too far to go now, Geordie.
No. I'll soon be through with tunnelling altogether, man.
I'll never do another one. Did you feel the sun on your back this morning? Before we started down? It's a lovely day we're missing.
I thought there came a shout then.
Nah, it was only my belly grumbling. I want me dinner. We'll take a rest soon, eh?
You didn't hear anything then?
No. Ever since that Williamson fella bobbed up, you've been hearing things.
Oh, God! Mike! Devlin, where is that? They blasted us to bits. We never heard no warning, did we?
It was the first death on our railway. Given the pioneering nature of the construction, the crude equipment, and limited experience of most of our workmen, there were surprisingly few accidents. None of them major.
With the completion of the Edge Hill Tunnel, plans were made for whitewashing its walls and installing singing gas jets, set in crystal and mounted on brackets and columns of ornate ironwork. When this was finished, George Stephenson charged the public £1 a head to marvel and tread the majestic length of the first railway tunnel ever built below a city.
Railway shares soared in value, but the cost of the earthworks, coupled with the enormous sums we were paying out in compensation to landowners, meant we now found ourselves crucially short of money, and were forced to apply to the Exchequer for a loan of £100,000. The government decided to send Thomas Telford to find out what exactly was going on in Liverpool, and to report on whether such a loan could possibly be justified.
Telford was the most distinguished civil engineer of his day and famous throughout Europe. Now, aged 72, he took time off from constructing the Birmingham and Liverpool Junction Canal to tour the line of way with George. He was not altogether happy with what he found.
Now, Stephenson, you have 19 bridges completed in a very perfect manner, but there yet remain 39 still to do. I agree that the viaduct at Sankey is holding its own. In fact, its progress appears most satisfactory.
Satisfactory? Mr. Telford, those 9 arches, each spanning some 50 feet, why, it will be one of the finest sights in England.
Aye, and built to stand some 200 years or more.
Indeed. Well, perhaps. But the Chatmoss crossing remains unfinished as yet, and almost 3 years in the making. Now, that cannot be good.
I've put extra gangs to work by night.
The extra work gangs incur higher costs. I cannot see you bringing in this railroad with a loan of £100,000, Mr. Booth. You surely need to double that figure, gentlemen.
Oh, I hardly think. George?
No, sir. I can no agree with Mr. Telford's findings. I can do it. I promise that all I'll cross the bogland for an outlay of £40,000 and it'll be done.
That can't be right, Stephenson. That figure was always in dispute.
No, by myself.
Well, time will tell, I dare say. Now, frankly, I am disturbed by your costing methods. Your system of contracting, it frequently appears that different contractors get different pay for doing identical work. And the amount offered seems to depend on just how you personally feel about them.
The jobs get done, and I's the only one complaining.
But most unsatisfactory and highly irregular. I cannot see that locomotives are capable of working the line either. I myself favour stationary steam engines, gentlemen, and I shall have to say so if my opinion is sought in London.
Aye, well, it's the railway that's to report on, sir, and know the haulage method. Thank God. Now, do we get our loan or not?
If the job is ever to be finished, it will call for £200,000. I'm certain of it. And I cannot recommend even the loan you are asking for, gentlemen, unless Mr. Stephenson here will sign an affidavit.
What's that, Mr. Booth?
We need your written promise, George. An agreement that you will have the line completed next year.
Thou's got my word.
Well, I'm afraid that will not be sufficient, Mr. Stephenson. If I am to persuade the Exchequer to part with the necessary funds, I need your signature.
We can go no further without the loan, George.
£100,000, Mr. Telford.
Yes, but I warn you, Stephenson, it will not be enough. And if you cannot finish the railway in 1830, well, I would urge you to consider the implications most carefully. Most carefully, good sir.
Has they had the contract drawn up, Mr. Booth?
Yes, George, it's ready.
Good man, well, let's have it then.
What? Well, does he understand me, sir? Has he thought the matter through?
George here is a practical genius, Mr. Telford, and he'll not give up now.
I can do it. Give me that pen, man.
The loan was granted, and work continued, bedevilled by weeks of rain. But George, as always, dismissed the cautious as weak and his critics as fools. He was convinced he would win through in the end, certain he could complete the line during the course of the next year. Gradually, the new wrought iron rails were laid, 18 miles of them on great stone blocks, and a further 13 miles, those over the embankments and Chatmoss itself, on wooden sleepers.
In between times, George designed the eye-catching Skew Bridge at Rainhill, where the lines of masonry had first to be traced out in canvas stretched over the scaffolding, and continued to argue his belief in locomotive power to work the railway when it should be finished.
In view of the public opposition to the locomotive, the reservations of Thomas Telford, and the doubts still held by many members of the Railway Board, a deputation was sent over to Darlington to investigate both types of steam engine, stationary and moving. To George's fury, it reported in favour of fixed steam engines. He promptly wrote a 4,000-word thesis on why the deputation was wrong, and why locomotives were better in terms of reliability, speed and economy. The board next asked 2 outside engineering experts to conduct an independent report, and in March 1829, these men too recommended the use of the fixed engine.
At the very moment when George needed all his energies for a last push to get the railway completed, he found himself battling on a new front, battling for all he believed in and held most dear, the future of the locomotive engine.
But Stephenson, even you cannot ignore this latest report. These are engineers of national repute, stating that your moving steam engine is an unreliable machine, hazardous even.
It's not true. Mr. Booth, Mr. Sanders does both seen them at work. Tell the company it's not true. Mr. Rastrick, in that very report, admits they are like to improve. I tell that I intend to improve them. I've been these 3 years in Liverpool, or the modifications would already be made. Can I not see that? I agree that initially locomotives may cost more to install, but with the fixed steam engines coupled by cable haulage, why, if just one link fails, then the entire railway can operate.
We see that, but it's my belief you planned a line at Wiston and Sutton to prevent our using horses.
No, I saved the cost of earthworks there by using inclined planes.
But had you been content to build a smooth and level track designed by Charles Vineyard, a horse might then have pulled 3 or 4 wagons along it, instead of just the one he can manage by road.
Using horses was never a possibility, Mr. Cropper.
No, indeed. The heavy volume of traffic we shall be dealing with excludes them, James.
It's a pity. A great shame, in my opinion. There's nothing so reliable as a bit of bloodstock. Well, then, that leaves us with these favourable reports on cable haulage.
Must my railway be strangled by ropes? Mr. Booth, sir.
Gentlemen, friends, we have here a pattern for the world. But it grows late in the day, and I, for one, think better on a full stomach. Let us not make this decision as to motive power lightly. I move that we adjourn for dinner and meet again in the morning.
Thanks, Mr. Booth.
You seem confident that time is on your side,
I
Stephenson.
work well at night, Mr. Cropper. Doubtless it comes of my no being a gentleman. Now, I'll have till tomorrow to make my points.
See you make them well, Stephenson.
Oh, I intend to, Mr. Cropper. I intend to. Does they want my affidavit on it?
A clear and dry evening. The Liverpool temperature's 56 degrees at 9 o'clock. This is Caroline Brown with Radio City News. A British school teacher has turned up in Pakistan after being held captive by Muslim insurgents.